My name is Eldon, and at 72 years old, I never imagined my own son would try to strip me of dignity in front of strangers. One evening at Bella Vista, he lifted a cup of hot coffee and poured it across my face, laughing as if I were too old to defend myself. But what he didn't know was that inside my jacket pocket, I carried something that would change everything, something that made him scream in horror when I revealed it. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about how far a father must go when his child mistakes love for weakness. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more stories like mine. I remember the moment as if the walls themselves could still echo his words. Dad, I need $500,000, $500,000. Think of it as an investment in the future. Lester's voice carried the sharp edge of entitlement that no father ever wants to hear from his son. He didn't ask with humility or gratitude. He demanded, pacing my living room like it was his boardroom, his designer shoes striking the hardwood floor Martha and I had refinished with our own hands. I stayed seated in my leather armchair, Churchill's biography open in my lap, more for comfort than reading. At 72, I'd learned the strength in silence, but my silence only fueled his arrogance. He gestured wildly, painting grand pictures in the air of an app that would supposedly revolutionize food delivery. Predictive ordering, AI-powered routes. Dad, I just need seed money to prove commitment. This will change everything. His words tumbled over each other, a salesman's pitch wrapped in desperation. I'd heard it all before, 3 times in fact. 3 ventures, 3 failures, each one cushioned by my money. And here he was, again convinced that I was his bank. I cleared my throat. Son, I don't have that kind of liquid cash available. I tried to keep my tone calm, steady. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the warmth in the room was gone. He stopped mid-stride, eyes narrowing. What do you mean you don't have it? You sold your real estate business for millions. That money is invested, diversified. It's not sitting in a checking account waiting for your next brilliant idea. The word brilliant slipped out sharper than I intended. His face twisted, his thinning hair clutched in frustration. He wasn't listening. He never did when money was involved. Then liquidate some, he shot back. This house is too big for you anyway. Sell it. Get yourself a condo. Or one of those senior communities with activities. You're rattling around in here like a ghost. That cut deeper than the money request. My jaw tightened as his words turned my home, the place where Martha taught him to flip pancakes, where we planted roses in the garden, into nothing more than square footage. This house is my home, I said slowly. Your mother and I built our lives here. Mom's been gone 5 years, Dad. 5 years. You can't live in a shrine forever. Be practical. The market's hot, you could clear $1 million easy. As if memories could be measured in appraisals. As if decades of laughter, love, and grief could be condensed into a price tag. I looked at him, really looked, and realized this wasn't about opportunity or vision. It was about greed, an inheritance he couldn't wait to claim while I was still alive. I gripped the book in my lap, its leather binding firm beneath my fingers. I stayed calm, but something inside me hardened. He thought age made me weak, that grief made me pliable. He couldn't have been more wrong. So tell me, if your child stood in your living room and demanded you sell your memories for his gain, what would you do? Lester didn't let the silence linger. He smirked, circling the room like a man appraising merchandise at an auction. His eyes traveled from the oak bookshelves to the family portraits, then to the fireplace where Martha's photograph rested in its silver frame. He chuckled, a hollow cutting sound. Dad, you really don't see it, do you? This place isn't a home anymore. It's a mausoleum. You keep clinging to these walls like they're sacred, but to everyone else, it just looks pathetic. You're living like a ghost in a museum nobody visits. The words struck harder than any demand for money. For him to call the home his mother loved a mausoleum, it was cruel in a way that made me question if the boy I raised was even still in there. I steadied my breath. At 72, I knew better than to rise to taunts. But inside, I felt my chest tighten, anger mixing with grief, like storm clouds brewing over a still lake. He pointed at Martha's photograph. Mom wouldn't want you stuck in the past. She'd want you to be practical. That's what Victoria says too. She worries about you, you know. Says you're getting too attached to things that don't matter anymore. Victoria. Always behind the curtain, whispering into his ear. I could almost hear her polished voice dripping with concern, but heavy with calculation. She had been there at Christmas, correcting me when I reached for the wrong serving spoon, giving me that patronizing smile, as if I were a child misbehaving at the table. Now her influence echoed through my son's lips. Practical, I repeated slowly. Is that what you call selling your childhood home to chase another scheme? His face hardened. Don't you dare throw my past in my face. This app is different. This is my breakthrough, and you could be part of it instead of clinging to dusty memories. I studied him, the expensive watch, the restless hands, the manic gleam in his eyes. This wasn't just desperation. It was entitlement forged by years of my own enabling. I had paid tuition down payments, bailed him out of failures, and each time I thought it would help him stand tall. Instead, it taught him I was the safety net he could exploit. He leaned in, lowering his voice. Look, Dad, you can't live forever. Why not make things easier now? Sell the house, give me the capital, and then relax in a condo with a view. Think about it, you'd have staff activities, people your age. Doesn't that sound better than rattling around here alone? My hands tightened around the armrests of my chair. He wasn't suggesting anymore, he was rehearsing, preparing me, softening the ground for something bigger. I could see it in his eyes, the way he avoided looking directly at Martha's photo. He wasn't just asking me to downsize, he was preparing to push me out. But I didn't argue. Not yet. I let him finish, nodding as though I were considering his words. Because sometimes silence is sharper than a sword. And sometimes the only way to defeat arrogance is to let it believe it's winning until the moment it realizes the trap was never yours, but theirs. So I'll ask you, have you ever stayed quiet while someone underestimated you just to watch them walk straight into their own downfall? A week later, the phone rang with Lester's carefully practiced charm. Dad, Victoria and I want to take you out to dinner. Bella Vista, your favorite place. 7 o'clock. We just want to talk. His tone was almost sweet, but it felt as false as a smile painted on glass. I agreed, not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to see what game they were playing. That evening, I put on the navy suit Martha once said made me look 10 years younger. The burgundy tie, too. I wanted no sign of weakness, only the quiet dignity of a man who had lived, loved, and built his life with his own 2 hands. Bella Vista was warm with candlelight and soft jazz when I walked in. Lester stood quickly, his grin wide arms out, as if this were a family reunion. Victoria remained seated, her phone face up on the table like an extra guest, its little red light waiting to record. Dad, you look wonderful, Lester said, pulling my chair out. His manners were an act, but I sat down anyway. We made small talk while the waiter poured their wine and my water. Then Lester reached down, unclasped a leather briefcase, and with a magician's flourish laid a stack of papers on the white tablecloth. The sound of the metal clasp snapping open echoed louder than the restaurant's music. What's this? I asked, though I already had a sinking suspicion. Sunset Haven, Victoria chimed in sweetly. A beautiful facility. Private rooms, on-site medical care activities, staff around the clock. We've already done most of the paperwork. All you need to do is sign. I picked up the top sheet. It wasn't just a brochure. It was admission paperwork filled in with my name, my address, even spaces for medical authorization. My signature lines sat there blank, like shackles waiting to be closed around my wrists. You could move in as soon as Friday. Lester added his voice, steady, calculated. Friday, I repeated softly. 3 days. That's how quickly they meant to erase my life. Victoria smiled, sliding her hand over Lester's. We only want what's best for you, Eldon. The house is too much. You need care. Selling it will cover all expenses and make sure you live comfortably. I laid the papers back on the table and looked them both in the eye. The fire inside me was quiet, not roaring, but steady as coal. You've been busy, I said. My voice didn't shake. Lester leaned forward, lowering his tone as if he were the reasonable one. Dad, this isn't about control. It's about your future. You can't handle things on your own anymore. Victoria's laugh cut the air like glass breaking. Exactly. You can barely manage a conversation without getting defensive. I folded my napkin neatly the way Martha had always taught me and placed it beside my glass. I see. That was all I said. Because what they didn't understand was that their signatures on those forms weren't proof of love, they were evidence. Evidence I would use. Tell me, if your own child handed you paperwork to strip away your independence, would you sign quietly, or would you wait and show them you still had teeth? The waiter had just set down a fresh basket of bread when Lester reached for his cup. I thought he was about to sip, maybe pause, before pushing me again. Instead, he stood abruptly, his eyes gleaming with something darker than frustration. He lifted the steaming coffee and, without a word, flung it across the table. The liquid arced under Bella Vista's soft light, a cruel rainbow of heat and bitterness, before splattering against my face and jacket. The sting wasn't severe, it cooled mid-flight, but it shocked me enough to draw a gasp. I dabbed at my cheek with the crisp linen napkin, steady, deliberate. There, Lester said loudly, slamming the empty cup into its saucer with a crack that silenced half the room. Look at him. Too old, too weak, can't even defend himself. Victoria's laughter rang out high and triumphant. She raised her phone, angling it toward me. Perfect documentation, she announced, to no one in particular, evidence of diminished capacity. Around us, forks froze mid-air. A woman covered her mouth. A man fumbled for his phone, unsure if he should call security or record the scene. The restaurant's soft jazz faltered into stunned silence. I folded the napkin again, each crease slow and precise. The fabric was blotched with coffee stains, but my hands didn't tremble. Years of business negotiations had taught me that composure was power, and power was exactly what they hoped to strip from me. The maitre d' approached cautiously. Sir, do you need assistance? Should we call everything's fine? I said clearly, my voice cutting through the charged air. Just a family discussion. Lester leaned back, chest heaving as though he'd accomplished something magnificent. Victoria's smile was razor sharp, her phone still recording. They expected me to explode to prove their script right. Instead, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp check. The restaurant lights glinted off its surface, $1 million written neatly in blue ink, payable to Lester Dean. I held it up for him to see, then for the room to witness. His smugness faltered, replaced by hunger in his eyes, the same hunger that had brought him here tonight. This, I said calmly, was meant for your new venture. I prepared it before I realized what you've become. Dad, wait. Lester stammered, lunging forward. But my hands were already moving. I tore the check clean in half, the sound sharp as a pistol crack. Gasps rippled through the room. I ripped it again, the 4 pieces fluttering onto the white tablecloth like autumn leaves. Victoria's phone slipped from her grip and clattered to the floor. Lester's face twisted, desperation replacing arrogance. "No, we can tape it. Banks don't honor checks that no longer exist," I said, brushing one last coffee droplet from my cheek. I stood, straightened my jacket, and turned to leave. Behind me, my son's hands scrambled at torn paper, and Victoria's whisper turned shrill. But I walked with steady steps toward the door, each stride carrying not just dignity, but the beginning of their education. "So tell me, what would you have done in my place? Lash out in anger, or let silence and action cut deeper than any outburst?" The cold January air struck my face as I stepped out of Bella Vista, but it felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in that suffocating dining room. Behind me, I could still hear Victoria's frantic voice and Lester's desperate muttering, scraping at torn paper like a child trying to glue back a broken toy. I didn't look back. Some endings deserve no backward glance. I walked down the sidewalk, each step steady, my shoulders squared. The coffee stains on my jacket had cooled, stiffening the fabric, but I wore them like medals, proof of what my son had become and what I had refused to be. When I reached home, I set my jacket across the arm of my chair and poured 2 fingers of scotch into a glass. The amber liquid caught the firelight as I sat in silence, the room heavy with the ghosts of earlier years. Martha's photograph seemed to watch me from the mantel. For a long moment, I wondered what she would think, seeing her only child throw coffee at his father, plotting to sell the home where we built our lives. Would she blame me for raising him poorly, or would she simply grieve the man he had become? I took a slow sip, the burn steadying me. "You always said patience wins wars," I murmured to the empty room, as though Martha could still hear me. And she was right. The check I tore was only bait, a test. The real weapon lay safe in the oak secretary in my study. I stood joints stiff but resolve stronger than ever and opened the bottom drawer. Inside a manila envelope rested documents I'd been gathering quietly, updated financial protections, revised estate plans, letters from my attorney. Everything Lester and Victoria thought they controlled was already slipping beyond their reach. I spread the papers across the desk, the lamplight shining on official seals and crisp signatures, bank security reports, social service evaluations, my attorney's preliminary notes. Evidence clean, undeniable. If they wanted war, they had already handed me the ammunition. I leaned back in the chair, hands folded across my chest, and for the first time that evening, I felt no anger. Just clarity. My son no longer saw me as a father. He saw me as a stumbling block to inheritance, a signature on a line, an obstacle to liquidate. And Victoria, she was sharpening him like a blade, driving him to cut deeper each time. But here's what they forgot: I had built an empire in real estate when nobody believed in me. I had weathered crashes that toppled men half my age. I knew how to fight not with fists, but with patience, documentation, and timing. As the clock ticked past midnight, I gathered the papers back into the envelope and locked it in the safe. Tonight was not the end. It was the opening move. Lester thought coffee would humiliate me, that a torn check would break me. He didn't see that the real lesson had only just begun. So I ask you, if your own blood betrayed you, would you cling to hope, or would you prepare for battle? It began with whispers, small, almost harmless, until I realized they carried the same script. Dorothy Henderson, my neighbor of 30 years, stood at my doorstep one snowy morning, her face pinched with concern. "Eldon," she said, "people are saying you've been having memory problems, forgetting bills, getting confused." She shifted uneasily, clutching her mail. "Are you sure you're all right living here alone?" Her words hit harder than Lester's insults at Bella Vista. Dorothy meant well, but the seed had been planted, and I knew exactly who had planted it. I reassured her politely, thanked her for her concern, and closed the door with my pulse hammering. The phone calls came next. Frank Morrison from the Real Estate Association, an old friend, phoned with the same tone of gentle alarm. "Eldon, your son mentioned you've been struggling with finances. Asked if I knew someone who could help manage things. Said he was worried about you." Frank's words carried sincerity, but beneath them I heard the echo of Victoria's careful phrasing. By noon, I'd received 4 more calls. Each person had spoken to Lester or Victoria. Each had been told nearly identical stories. Forgetfulness, confusion, declining judgment. They weren't just gossiping, they were laying groundwork. I sat at my oak desk, the same one I'd used to plan developments that built half this city, and opened my laptop. My fingers moved with the ease of long habit, pulling up Victoria's social media accounts. What I found was worse than I imagined: carefully curated posts of her looking weary but brave. Caring for aging parents is hard-won read, especially when they don't recognize their own limitations. Another post asked her followers, "What would you do if your father-in-law refused the help he so clearly needs?" The comments were a chorus of sympathy. "So heartbreaking. Guardianship might be your only option. Protect him before it's too late." Each comment added weight to their narrative, turning me into a frail old man in the court of public opinion. I didn't rage. I didn't call Lester or Victoria. Instead, I pressed print screen again and again, documenting every word, every timestamp. Each sympathetic comment became another line of evidence proof of their campaign. By the end of the night, I had a digital folder stuffed with screenshots, each file carefully labeled. As I closed the laptop, I realized something important: their cruelty was sloppy. They believed I wouldn't notice, wouldn't understand how social media could be weaponized. They mistook my silence for ignorance. That was their mistake. I poured myself a cup of coffee the next morning, standing at the same kitchen window where Martha used to hum while arranging roses. The steam rose steady and warm, unlike the bitter splash Lester had thrown at me days earlier. Outside, the world was blanketed in white, serene, untouched by their schemes. But inside, I knew war had begun, not with fists or shouting, but with narratives and lies. So tell me, if the people closest to you spread rumors that you were losing your mind, would you lash out? Or would you quietly build the case that would one day destroy them? The phone became my enemy. Every ring carried another version of the same carefully rehearsed script. Old friends, distant colleagues, even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, all suddenly concerned about my declining memory. One afternoon, Margaret Chen, a retired teacher I'd known since the early days of my real estate career, called. "Eldon, I hate to ask this, but Lester mentioned you've been forgetting to pay your utility bills. Is everything all right? Do you need someone to help organize things?" I let her words settle before answering calmly. "Margaret, I haven't missed a bill in 40 years. My accounts are balanced to the cent. Would you like me to read you my latest bank statement?" She chuckled nervously, embarrassed, and apologized. But the damage wasn't her fault. She was just another pawn in their campaign. I began saving everything. Each voicemail, each text, each email laced with concern went into a digital folder I labeled false alarms. My desk became a war room, every call logged, every time-stamped message preserved like ammunition waiting to be fired. One evening, after the 5th call of the day, I sat back in my leather chair, staring at the growing stack of printouts. Their pattern was unmistakable. Lester and Victoria weren't careless. They were systematic. They wanted to build a chorus of voices, each echoing the same story until it sounded like truth. I'd built developments brick by brick. Now I would dismantle their lies piece by piece. At dinner that night, I couldn't help but think of the irony. My son once dreamed of working beside me, learning the ropes of business, building something lasting. I had letters still tied with Martha's blue ribbon, where he promised to make me proud. And now here he was making me infamous instead. But I didn't linger on grief. I poured myself a small glass of scotch and reminded myself grief clouds judgment, and judgment is the one thing I could not afford to lose. A few days later, Frank Morrison called again. His voice was careful, as though he were walking a tightrope. "Eldon, I need to tell you something. Lester's been reaching out directly to people in our network. He's painting a picture that you're confused, unstable. He even asked me if I knew a good elder care attorney. I told him straight, you've always been sharper than me. But—" Frank hesitated. "Be careful. He's laying groundwork." I thanked Frank, hung up, and leaned back in my chair. Frank had confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't gossip. It was strategy. A slow erosion of my reputation until even my allies doubted me. I opened my safe, removed the envelope, and slipped Frank's call log inside. Every piece mattered. They thought they were building a case against me. In reality, they were building mine against them. So let me ask you, when lies circle around you, like vultures, do you swat wildly at their wings? Or do you wait steady your aim and fire only when it matters most? The knock came on a gray afternoon. Snow flurries drifted across the front lawn as I opened the door to find a young woman standing with a tablet tucked under her arm. Her smile was polite but professional. "Mr. Dean, I'm Jennifer Walsh with the Chicago Department of Aging Services. We've received reports of concern about your welfare. I'd like to conduct a brief assessment, if you don't mind." Reports of concern. The phrase carried the weight of Lester and Victoria's fingerprints all over it. I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Of course," I said evenly. "Come in." She settled into the living room, her eyes scanning the bookshelves, the neatly stacked firewood, the framed photographs. Everything Martha and I had built whispered of order, not chaos. Jennifer opened her tablet. "I'll ask you a few questions and give some short tasks. Nothing to worry about." Her questions ranged from the mundane to the tricky. "What day of the week is it? Can you recite these 5 words back to me after a few minutes? Balance this checkbook with these sample transactions." I answered each calmly, methodically. I'd balanced ledgers for decades, negotiated contracts worth millions. A simple math problem on a tablet was hardly a challenge. She asked me to walk across the room and back. My steps were steady, my back straight. I even chuckled when she asked me to draw a clock and place the hands at 11:10. "You should have seen me sketch site plans in the old days." I said, my lines clean and precise. 2 hours passed, each test a quiet triumph. Jennifer typed quickly, nodding. "Mr. Dean demonstrates excellent cognitive function, maintains his home appropriately, shows clear understanding of his financial affairs, no evidence of reported concerns." Her words were clinical, but to me they sounded like victory. I offered her coffee before she left, freshly brewed, not hurled across a table like my son's display of cruelty. She smiled, declined politely, and shook my hand. "For what it's worth, you're sharper than most people I meet in this job." After she left, I sat by the fire with the printed report in my hands. Lester and Victoria had sent a soldier to test me, and she had left carrying proof of my strength. I slipped the signed assessment into my envelope of evidence. Another brick in the wall they could never climb. That night I thought about the irony. They wanted to portray me as a frail old man slipping into dementia. Instead, the state itself had certified my competence. They hadn't just failed, they had armed me. I poured myself a glass of water, not scotch this time, and raised it in a silent toast to Martha's photo on the mantel. "They don't know who they're dealing with," I whispered. "So tell me, if someone tried to prove you were losing your mind, wouldn't you savor the moment when their own test cleared your name beyond doubt?" The call came from Citizens Bank on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen grinding beans for my daily coffee when the phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Dean," the voice said, professional but cautious. "This is Angela from the bank's security department. I wanted to verify some unusual activity on your account." My stomach tightened. "Go on." "Yesterday, your son visited one of our branches. He claimed he was acting as your caregiver due to what he described as your memory decline. He requested access to your accounts, stating he needed to manage your finances on your behalf." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The beans sat unground in the hopper, the machine humming faintly. My own son had stood in a bank and tried to take control of everything I had built using lies as his key. Angela continued. "We of course denied his request. Our policies require official power of attorney or guardianship papers, but we thought you should be aware." I let out a slow breath. "Thank you, Angela. Please document this incident fully and send me a copy." "Already done," she replied. "You'll receive the report by mail and email. I'm sorry you're going through this." After hanging up, I stood at the window watching cardinals peck at the snow-covered feeder Martha had once insisted on placing just so. The birds moved with a simple honesty my own blood had abandoned. My hand clenched into a fist before I forced it to relax. Rage was tempting, but strategy was stronger. I retrieved my envelope from the safe and slid the bank's email printout inside. Attempted fraud denied, but documented. Another nail, another weapon. They thought their lies would slip through unnoticed, but the world leaves paper trails, and I was gathering everyone. That evening, I poured myself a small scotch and sat in the library reflecting. Lester and Victoria believed they were clever, using charm with friends, sympathy online, and deceit with institutions. But they underestimated the patience of a man who had weathered recessions, negotiated hostile takeovers, and outlasted competitors far shrewder than they could ever hope to be. I imagined Lester at the bank, his voice carrying false worry as he painted me senile. I pictured Victoria rehearsing the lines with him, coaching him on how to appear convincing. And then I pictured Angela's face, politely unimpressed, refusing to hand over what wasn't theirs. The image made me smile. They wanted to lock me away in a nursing home, strip my independence, and sell my house for profit. Instead, they had handed me evidence of attempted financial exploitation, clear as ink on paper. I set down my glass, the fire crackling nearby. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was preparation. They thought I was a frail old man waiting for their mercy. They were about to learn I was the architect of my own fortress. So let me ask you, if your own child tried to steal from you through lies, would you confront them in anger, or would you let their failure become your strongest weapon? By the time February rolled in, my envelope was thick with evidence. Screenshots of Victoria's poisonous posts, logs of every concerned call from friends and neighbors, the state social worker's glowing report of my competence. And now, Citizens Bank's record of Lester's failed attempt to seize my accounts. Each piece was another brick in the wall I was building, one they would never climb. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney, Sarah Peterson, a woman I trusted because she had guided Martha and me through estate planning years ago. Her office overlooked Lake Michigan, the winter waves gray and restless beneath the February sky. We sat across the polished mahogany conference table as I spread my documentation in neat stacks. Sarah adjusted her glasses and read silently, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "Eldon, this is extraordinary. They've essentially built your case for you. defamation, harassment, attempted financial exploitation. It's all here. If they push for guardianship, this evidence will bury them. I nodded, feeling the weight of 72 years balanced on that table. That's why I'm here. It's not enough to defend myself. I need to make sure they can't try this again. I want to rewrite my will. Lester is to be completely disinherited. Sarah paused, studying me. That's a serious step. Once it's executed properly, it cannot be undone without another formal process. Are you certain? I leaned back, eyes fixed on the lake outside. Certain. My son threw coffee on me in public to prove I was helpless. He and his wife tried to strip me of my home, my reputation, and my independence. That isn't family, it's predation. I'd rather my wealth go to causes that actually help people than to those who see me as an obstacle to be erased. She gave a slow nod. Very well, we'll draft the documents today. I'll have 2 witnesses ready for signature. 2 hours later, my pen glided across the pages, steady and deliberate. With each signature, Lester's name vanished from my estate, replaced by institutions I respected: the Chicago Children's Education Foundation, the Elder Care Advocacy Group, the Harold Washington Library Fund. Places that would turn my life's work into something good, something enduring. When it was done, Sarah gathered the papers into a folder embossed with her firm's seal. It's official, Eldon. Your estate is protected, and if they challenge it, we'll meet them with this. She tapped the thick stack of evidence I had compiled. I left her office with the documents in my briefcase, the winter wind biting at my cheeks. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. Not because the battle was over, it wasn't, but because I had shifted from defense to offense. They thought they could corner me with whispers and lies. Instead, they had forced me to act with finality. That night, I poured tea instead of scotch. I raised the cup to Martha's photo. It's done, I whispered. Our son will never own a piece of what we built. But others will. So let me ask you, if betrayal came from your own blood, would you leave them your legacy, or would you use it to build something far greater? If I thought my silence would discourage them, I was wrong. Victoria only grew louder. Her social media posts multiplied like weeds after rain. One morning, while sipping my coffee, I opened her page to see a new entry plastered with a somber photo of her and Lester, their faces drawn with theatrical concern. The caption read, "Sometimes the hardest part of caring for aging parents is when they don't realize how much help they truly need. Please pray for us as we try to protect Dad." My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to keep reading. The comments flooded in. So heartbreaking. You're doing the right thing. Guardianship might be necessary. Strangers, friends, distant relatives all nodding along to her carefully written lies. She had turned my existence into a pity story for likes and sympathy. I didn't respond. Instead, I clicked print screen again and again, adding to the folder already brimming with her staged compassion. Every post, every comment became another thread in the net she didn't realize she was weaving around herself. Later that week, I overheard 2 neighbors whispering outside as I brought in the mail. "It's sad, isn't it? Eldon's losing it. Did you see Victoria's post?" They glanced at me, guilt flashing across their faces, then waved too quickly. I nodded politely, though inside I felt the cold edge of betrayal. The court of public opinion was powerful, but courts of law dealt in evidence, and I had plenty. Still, the sting of humiliation was real. Martha and I had built a reputation in this neighborhood for decades, hosting barbecues, supporting fundraisers, sharing holidays. Now, thanks to Victoria's theater, people crossed the street with pity in their eyes. Not anger, not contempt, pity. That was worse. I returned inside, sat at my desk, and studied the growing stack of printouts. This wasn't just defamation. It was character assassination designed to make me appear incompetent, even when the state and my doctor had confirmed otherwise. They were trying to write me out of my own story. That night, I added notes to each screenshot, labeling them with dates, times, and cross-references to my clean medical evaluations. I was building not just a defense, but a narrative of my own, a story that showed exactly how far they were willing to go. The phone rang again, a friend from church offering gentle advice about accepting help gracefully. I thanked her, hung up, and added another log entry. By now the pattern was undeniable. They were relentless. But what Victoria didn't know was that her need for attention was my greatest advantage. The more she posted, the deeper she dug. Sympathy online was temporary. Evidence in a courtroom was permanent. I leaned back, folding my hands, a grim smile touching my lips. They thought I was on trial. But really, they were handing me the rope to hang their own case. So tell me, when lies about you spread far and wide, do you waste energy shouting them down, or do you let the liars build your evidence for you? The first hint came from Frank Morrison again. He called late one evening, his voice cautious. "Then I thought you should know. Lester's been shopping around for attorneys. He's trying to file guardianship papers." I let out a slow breath, and Frank chuckled, though, without humor. "And nobody will touch it. Every lawyer he's approached knows your reputation. They've seen the reports from the social worker, your doctor's evaluation. There's nothing to stand on. But he's persistent, Eldon. He won't stop." Persistent, that was one word for it. Desperate was another. Over the next week, I heard the same story from different corners. An old colleague mentioned that Lester had walked into a downtown firm only to be shown the door. Another friend said Victoria had contacted a family attorney in the suburbs pleading their case. Each time the answer was the same: without evidence, no judge would even consider guardianship. Still, their attempts unsettled me. Not because I feared losing, I had the evidence to crush their claims, but because it revealed their state of mind. Rational people would have stopped after one rejection. They kept trying, burning money on consultations, humiliating themselves with each refusal. One afternoon, I sat in the library sorting through more screenshots when my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. It was a message from a paralegal at one of the firms they'd contacted. She'd called me directly out of professional courtesy. "Mr. Dean, I wanted you to be aware that your son and daughter-in-law attempted to initiate guardianship proceedings. After reviewing your case history and existing evaluations, our attorneys declined. I thought you should know in case they continue elsewhere." I saved the voicemail, labeled it, and slipped a transcript into my evidence envelope. Another nail. But the rejection wasn't stopping them. It was making them reckless. I could almost see them in their Evanston townhouse, Victoria pacing with her phone in hand, Lester slamming his fist against the kitchen table. Each rejection fed their fury, and when fury drives ambition, mistakes are inevitable. That night, I poured a cup of tea and sat in the quiet. I remembered the boy Lester used to be, the boy who begged me to teach him how to ride a bike, who once whispered, "I want to be just like you, Dad." I thought of how far he had drifted from that child. I felt the ache of loss, but not weakness. It only clarified what I already knew: he was no longer the boy I raised, but a man shaped by greed and resentment. The next morning, I called Sarah, my attorney. "Add this voicemail to the file," I told her. "Every refusal, every attempt, they all show pattern. A pattern of harassment and manipulation." Sarah's voice was steady. "You're building a fortress, Eldon. Let them keep throwing stones. They only strengthen your walls." And she was right. With every failed attorney visit, Lester wasn't proving my weakness, he was proving his own desperation. So tell me what's more dangerous, an enemy with power or an enemy with nothing left to lose? It happened by accident, or maybe by providence. One Sunday afternoon, Lester and Victoria stopped by under the guise of collecting a scarf she had forgotten at Bella Vista weeks earlier. I suspected it was another excuse to measure my resolve, so I stayed calm, letting them chatter as they moved about the foyer. When they stepped outside to the porch, Victoria's phone buzzed. She answered quickly, her voice carrying through the half-open door. I was about to close it when I froze at her words. If the legal route doesn't work, we'll find other ways to make his life impossible. My heart slowed, each beat heavy in my chest. Lester's reply was sharp, angrier than I'd ever heard him. He'll regret opposing us. He thinks he's clever, but I'll make sure he pays. I stood in the hall, phone in hand. Illinois law allowed recording of conversations on my property. With one press of a button, their venom became evidence. My phone captured every word, their voices dripping with entitlement and threat. Victoria continued, her tone icy. Social media is just the beginning. We'll make sure the neighbors keep doubting him. We'll push the story until no one can take him seriously. And when the time comes, he won't have a soul left to stand with him. I ended the recording only after their car pulled away, the taillights disappearing into the snowy dusk. My legs felt heavy as I returned to the study, the envelope of evidence waiting like a trusted ally. I played the recording back once, their voices crackling in the quiet room, confirming that I had not imagined their cruelty. Then I saved it to multiple devices, printed a transcript, and tucked both away. That evening, I sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I thought of the boy who once called me his hero, who once looked at me with admiration rather than disdain. That boy was gone, replaced by a man coached by a woman who saw me as a bank account with a pulse. But sadness was quickly replaced by clarity. Their threats didn't frighten me, they revealed desperation. They couldn't win in court, so they planned to win by attrition, by smearing my name until I was too weary to fight back. They had underestimated me again. Later that night, I called Sarah. I have something new, I told her. A recording. Their own words. You'll want to hear it. She listened in silence before responding. Eldon, this isn't just defense material. This is offensive. With this, you could pursue charges for harassment or even intimidation. They don't realize how much trouble they've just created for themselves. I poured myself another cup of coffee, hot, steady, not hurled in malice, and allowed myself a rare smile. They thought they were tightening the noose around my neck. Instead, they had tied it neatly around their own. So tell me, if you caught betrayal in your own child's voice, would you crumble under the weight, or would you record it and let their words become the rope? The shift in the neighborhood was subtle at first. A quick glance away when I waved, a polite smile that didn't reach the eyes. By March, it was unmistakable. Friends who once lingered over the fence to talk about gardening now crossed the street to avoid awkward conversation. Even Mrs. Henderson, who had lived 2 doors down for 30 years, looked uneasy when we bumped into each other at the grocery store. I knew why. Victoria had perfected her campaign. Another post surfaced online. It's painful when loved ones refuse to accept help. Please pray for strength as we do what's best for Dad, even when he can't see it. Attached was a photo of my house, its snow-covered lawn framed to look cold and lonely, as if I were a recluse wasting away inside. The comments were predictable. So sad. You're such good children to care for him. Guardianship might be your only option. Each one another stone cast at my reputation. One Saturday, I overheard 2 neighbors talking while I shoveled the walkway. Poor man. Did you see Victoria's last post? He's really slipping. Their words were hushed, but the pity in their tone was louder than any accusation. I straightened my back and finished shoveling each scoop of snow deliberate. I didn't confront them. I didn't shout my innocence. I simply walked inside, brewed a pot of coffee, and logged their comments in my growing evidence file. Dignity would be my shield documentation, my sword. The following week, I invited a few old friends over for coffee. Frank Morrison came along with Margaret Chen and another retired colleague. They entered my home expecting to see the confused, broken man Victoria had painted online. Instead, they found a clean house bills stacked neatly in order, and me standing at the stove frying eggs with the same precision I once gave to million-dollar deals. We sat in the kitchen, and I spoke plainly. You've heard things. You've read things. Let me tell you the truth. I showed them the social worker's report, the doctor's evaluation, even the bank's documentation of Lester's failed attempt. They read in silence, exchanging glances. When they finally looked up, the pity was gone, replaced by quiet respect. Margaret's voice broke the silence. Eldon, they've misjudged you terribly. Frank leaned back, shaking his head. You're sharper than half the board members I've worked with. They won't get away with this. That afternoon, as they left, Margaret paused at the door. If they come after you in court, I'll testify to your clarity. I won't let lies destroy what I know to be true. For the first time in weeks, I felt the warmth of loyalty again. Not everyone had turned. Some could still see through the fog of manipulation. I returned to my library, slipping fresh testimonies into my envelope. The war for reputation was being waged in whispers and pity, but I would win it with truth and patience. So tell me, when neighbors believe lies about you, do you fight fire with fire, or do you let the truth quietly rebuild the trust they tried to burn? By early spring, my library had transformed into something between a sanctuary and a command center. The oak desk, once a place for leisurely reading, now held neatly stacked folders, each labeled in my steady handwriting. Bank reports, medical evaluations, social media screenshots, witness statements. Every time Victoria posted a dramatic plea, every time Lester whispered lies into the ears of old friends, I captured it and filed it away. They thought they were burying me in doubt, but all they were doing was handing me proof. One afternoon, I carried the thick envelope to Sarah Peterson's office downtown. The mahogany conference table gleamed beneath the afternoon light as I spread the contents out before her. She adjusted her glasses, studying each piece with professional precision. Eldon, she said finally, what you've compiled here is overwhelming. You've got medical assessments declaring your competence, bank reports of attempted fraud, a social worker's clean evaluation, and even a recorded conversation of them threatening to make your life impossible. This isn't just defense, it's ammunition. I leaned back, folding my hands. That's exactly what I want. They've made it clear they won't stop. I want to make sure the final word is mine, not theirs. Sarah nodded. Then it's time we plan the next move. With this evidence, you could not only defend against guardianship, but pursue legal action for harassment and defamation. And with your new will already in place, your estate is secured. They have no legal path left. Hearing those words felt like the first deep breath after months underwater. Still, I wasn't naive. They won't stop quietly. They'll try something desperate. Her expression was firm. Then let them. Desperation makes mistakes easier to prove. Just keep documenting, and when the time is right, we'll bring this to light. I gathered the papers back into the envelope, sliding them into my briefcase. The weight wasn't just paper, it was power. It was the accumulated proof of their betrayal ready to be unleashed when they pushed too far. That night, I sat by the fire with a fresh cup of tea, staring at the flames. Martha's photograph caught the glow from the mantel, her smile frozen in time. You'd be proud, I murmured. I'm not shouting. I'm not breaking. I'm preparing. I realized then that the quiet patience of age wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Lester had his anger, Victoria her theatrics. I had time law and truth. Those would be the tools that ended this war. As I slipped the briefcase into the safe and spun the lock, I knew the next confrontation was inevitable. They would come for me again, certain they had worn me down. But when they did, I would be ready to show them that some fathers still had sharper teeth than their children could ever imagine. So tell me when you know betrayal is circling for another strike. Do you wait in fear, or do you prepare quietly, certain that the final blow will be yours? The invitation came from me this time. After months of silence and maneuvering, I picked up the phone and dialed Lester. His voice carried that familiar mix of suspicion and greed. "Dad, I've been thinking," I said, keeping my tone level. "It's time we settle everything. Meet me tomorrow at Bella Vista, 7 o'clock. Bring Victoria." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Finally coming to your senses, old man." He couldn't resist the jab even when he thought he was winning. "Just be there," I said, and hung up. The following evening, I dressed with care. Navy suit, burgundy tie, dignity as armor. In my briefcase, I carried the documents Sarah had prepared: my new will, certified reports, bank statements, social worker evaluations, and transcripts of their own words. It wasn't just paper. It was justice waiting to be delivered. Bella Vista looked the same as that fateful night months earlier: warm lighting, soft jazz, the faint scent of garlic and wine. But this time I entered not as a man ambushed, but as a man armed. Lester and Victoria were already seated at table 7, the same table where they had once tried to humiliate me. Lester wore his best suit, and Victoria draped herself in jewelry that practically shouted for attention. Their smiles were wide rehearsed. "Dad, you look wonderful," Lester said, standing to embrace me with exaggerated warmth. His grip was tight, almost possessive, as if he were claiming victory in front of the room. I sat down, placing my briefcase gently on the table. "Let's not waste time. I promised a surprise, and here it is." I opened the case, sliding out a folder embossed with Sarah Peterson's seal. The first document I laid before them was my new will. Lester leaned forward eagerly, his eyes scanning the text, confident he was about to see his fortune secured. But as his gaze reached the disinheritance clause, the color drained from his face. This isn't real," he stammered. "You can't do this to me." Victoria snatched the paper, her perfectly painted nails trembling as she read. "You've left everything to charities, libraries, advocacy groups. Are you insane?" I met her gaze calmly. "No. I'm sane enough to know the difference between care and exploitation." "You showed me which side you stand on." Lester slammed his hand on the table, the silverware rattling. "After everything I've done for you," I cut him off, my voice steady. "After everything I've done for you. College tuition, down payments, bailouts for every failed business, and you repay me by throwing coffee in my face and trying to lock me in a nursing home." Victoria's composure cracked. Her voice rose shrill enough to turn nearby heads. "This is insane. We'll challenge it in court. You're clearly not competent to make these decisions." I smiled for the first time that evening, pulling another folder from the briefcase. "Then you'll love what comes next. So tell me if you had the chance to confront betrayal at the very same table it began. Would you walk away, or would you return armed with the truth?" I slid the next folder across the white tablecloth. The embossed seal of Peterson Clean and Associates gleamed under the candlelight. "Before you threaten court, you might want to see what you'd be facing." Victoria reached for the papers with impatient hands, her confidence returning, as she prepared to dismiss them. But when the first page revealed a screenshot of her own social media post, her smile froze. The caption read, "Heartbreaking when elderly relatives refuse help. Sometimes guardianship is the only option." Her face drained of color as she flipped through page after page, each one time-stamped, annotated and signed off by my attorney. Photos of my house, captions about my supposed decline, comments egged on by her followers, all documented. "This is libel," I said evenly. "Every word you typed, every photo you staged. You didn't just defame me privately, you broadcasted it to the world. And I've preserved every detail." Victoria's fingers trembled. You can't use social media posts in court. People exaggerate online." I leaned back, calm as stone. "Courts don't care if you were exaggerating when your words are used to manipulate, harass, and build a false narrative. And guess what? I also have the comments from neighbors and friends who acted on your lies. That's called a pattern of harm." Lester tried to snatch the folder away, but I placed another set of documents in front of him. "And this," I said, sliding the pages closer, "is the transcript of your little phone call, the one you had on my property when you thought I wasn't listening." He'll regret opposing us. Social media is just the beginning. We'll make his life impossible. Recognize those words. His face went pale. "You recorded us legally," I answered. "Illinois law allows me to record conversations on my property, and I've already secured multiple backups, both digital and printed. Even if you burn these pages tonight, the evidence lives elsewhere." The room around us had fallen silent. A few diners had stopped pretending not to listen. The clink of cutlery and hum of jazz had faded into background tension, the kind that makes strangers lean in without realizing it. Victoria slammed the folder shut, her voice rising. "You set us up. You're twisting everything to make us look like villains." I looked at her squarely, unflinching. "I didn't set you up. You revealed yourselves. I just pressed record." Lester's jaw tightened as he scanned the transcript again. He whispered to Victoria, but the panic in his eyes betrayed him. He had thought his father was too old, too slow, too gullible. Now he realized every word he had spoken was a nail in his own coffin. I folded my hands on the table, letting the silence stretch. The evidence lay between us, undeniable, immutable. Their smears had turned to shackles. Their whispers had become a noose. So tell me, if you held undeniable proof of betrayal, would you unleash it quietly at the table or save it for the courtroom where the whole world could see? Victoria pushed the folder away as if the papers were poison. "This doesn't prove anything," she snapped, her voice cracking. "Anyone can take screenshots. Anyone can twist words. The truth is, you're not capable of making these decisions anymore." Her last card, my competence. I had been waiting for it. I reached calmly into the briefcase and pulled out another thick folder. The cover bore the seal of the Chicago Department of Aging Services. I laid it on the table and opened it slowly, page by page, letting the weight of official signatures and government stamps speak louder than I ever could. "This," I said, sliding the first document toward her, "is the welfare assessment conducted in my home. 2 hours of tests, every detail logged by a licensed social worker. Her conclusion: Mr. Dean demonstrates excellent cognitive function, maintains his home appropriately, shows clear understanding of his financial affairs, no evidence of reported concerns." Lester leaned forward, scanning the words. His lips moved silently, as though he couldn't believe what he was reading. "And this," I continued, presenting the next set, "is Dr. Martinez's medical evaluation. 15 years as my physician. He examined me thoroughly, physical, cognitive, the works. His report: physically robust for age, cognitively sharp. No signs of dementia or impairment. Patient demonstrates complete capacity for independent living and financial decision-making. I paused, letting the silence press against them. Around us, other diners had fallen completely still. Even the waiter refilling water glasses seemed frozen mid-motion. Victoria's hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Her lipstick smile was gone, replaced by pale fury. "Doctors can be wrong," she muttered. "Social workers get fooled. You're very good at pretending." I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only they could hear, though I knew the nearby tables were hanging on every word. Pretending. If I'm pretending, then explain why multiple independent professionals, all with legal liability, signed their names to these reports. Explain why the state itself cleared me. Explain why your campaign has failed at every turn. Lester slammed his fist on the table, silverware clattering. "You think this will stop us? We'll find another angle. We'll make sure." "No," I interrupted firmly. "You won't. Because every attempt you make only adds to my file. Every lie, every rumor, every desperate visit to another attorney is documented. You haven't built a case against me. You've built my case against you." For the first time, I saw something break in Lester's eyes. Not just anger, not just greed, but fear. Realization dawned on him that the power he thought he held was slipping through his fingers. I gathered the reports back into the folder, stacking them neatly. Competence isn't a debate. It's been proven. And the more you argue otherwise, the more foolish you look. So tell me, if the people who wanted to control your life had their last argument crushed by hard proof, would you smile in silence? Or would you press the papers across the table and watch their faces crumble? The pile of evidence sat between us like a loaded weapon. Lester stared at it, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Victoria's hands fluttered at her phone as if searching for a way to spin the scene even now. But the performance was over. I leaned back, my voice calm. "You've had every chance. You could have chosen love, respect, even patience. Instead, you chose greed. You tried to strip me of my home, my reputation, my independence. You threw coffee on me in public to prove I was helpless. You spread lies until neighbors pitied me. And now you sit here exposed by your own words and actions." Lester's face twisted with desperation. "Dad, listen. We can fix this. Forget the paperwork, forget the posts. I'll stop. I'll change. I'll make it right." His words tumbled over each other, frantic, the same tone I had heard when his third business collapsed, and he begged for another bailout. Victoria leaned in, her voice shrill. "Yes, Eldon. We were only trying to protect you. You've misunderstood. We love you. This is family." I looked at her coldly. Family doesn't humiliate you in restaurants. Family doesn't try to lock you away for profit. Family doesn't invent dementia to steal what isn't theirs. Their pleas grew louder, attracting glances from nearby tables. The maitre d' stood at the edge of the room, uncertain whether to intervene. The other diners watched openly, now the illusion of privacy gone. I placed my hands flat on the table. "You've already proven what you deserve, and it isn't my legacy." Victoria's composure shattered. "You can't cut us out. You can't just give everything to strangers." I gathered the papers into the briefcase with deliberate precision. They're not strangers. They're institutions that help children, protect seniors, and preserve knowledge. They'll use what I've built to uplift others, not destroy me. Lester's eyes darted wildly, searching for a foothold. "Please, Dad, don't do this. I'm your son." I paused, letting the silence stretch. My son. The boy who once grinned, gap-toothed on a bicycle, who once whispered he wanted to be just like me. That boy had been gone for years, replaced by the man groveling before me. I stood sliding the chair back slowly. Goodbye, Lester. Goodbye, Victoria. The words landed heavier than any shout. I turned, walking toward the exit with steady steps, the weight of 72 years carried with dignity. Behind me, Victoria sobbed, her voice breaking into hysterics, while Lester muttered frantically about lawyers and appeals. But I didn't look back. The night air outside was crisp, almost cleansing. The city lights shimmered across the lake, and for the first time in months, I felt lighter. The war wasn't just won, it was over. So tell me, if the people you trusted most begged for forgiveness only after being exposed, would you give them another chance? Or would you walk away, knowing some lessons must be final? 3 months later, the storm had passed. Not because Lester and Victoria surrendered gracefully, but because they had exhausted themselves against walls too high to climb. My attorney confirmed they'd consulted 3 more firms, only to be turned away each time. Their social media posts grew quieter, their audience smaller. The neighborhood whispers faded once people realized the lies had no teeth. Meanwhile, my life grew fuller. Every Tuesday, I sat in the children's section of the Harold Washington Library, reading aloud to a circle of bright-eyed kids. Their laughter filled the corners of my heart, that grief and betrayal had once hollowed out. "Mr. Dean, will you read us another?" they'd ask, tugging at my sleeve. And I always did. For them, I wasn't a senile burden, I was simply a storyteller, a friend. My will had been finalized weeks earlier, redirecting my estate to organizations that would outlive me: scholarships for underprivileged students, funding for elder care advocacy support, for libraries that had given me comfort since childhood. Letters of gratitude began to arrive, written in careful handwriting or typed with earnest humility. One young woman wrote that a scholarship from the Education Foundation would allow her to attend college, breaking a cycle of poverty in her family. That letter alone was worth more than every hollow promise Lester had ever made. At home, the silence no longer felt like loneliness. My garden bloomed again, roses bright against the fence line Martha and I once painted together. Neighbors who had doubted me now stopped by with pies books or simply conversation. Trust once cracked had been mended with truth. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, I thought of Lester, the boy who once beamed with pride holding his first bicycle, who once whispered, "I want to be just like you." Somewhere along the way, he had lost himself to greed. I had lost a son, yes, but I had gained clarity. Some bonds, no matter how sacred, rot beyond repair. I didn't hate him. Hatred is heavy, and I'd carried enough weight already. Instead, I pitied him, a man who had every opportunity, but mistook love for weakness and inheritance for entitlement. He had chosen his path. I had chosen mine. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, I raised my cup to the memory of Martha. "It's done," I whispered. "Our legacy is safe not in his hands, but in the hands of those who will cherish it. So let me ask you, if you had to choose between clinging to blood that betrays you or leaving behind a legacy that truly matters, which would you choose?" Looking back, I realized this was never just about money or property. It was about respect, the simple but sacred truth that age does not erase dignity. My son and his wife thought they could rewrite my life as though I were already gone, but they forgot one thing: a father's silence is not weakness. It is patience, and patience can be sharper than any sword. I don't tell this story with bitterness. I tell it with hope that others might see themselves in it. Maybe you faced children who dismissed your worth, or family who tried to strip away the years of work you built with your own hands. If so, let my experience be a reminder you are not powerless. The law, the truth, and your own resolve can protect you when love fails. And to parents listening now, If you are tempted to treat your children's future as more important than your own present, stop and think. Legacy isn't about handing over wealth to the undeserving. It's about leaving behind something meaningful, something that reflects your values, not their greed. So I ask you, have you ever faced betrayal from your own family? How did you handle it? And what did you learn? Share your story in the comments so others can find strength in your words. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes the greatest justice is not revenge, it's the peace of knowing you chose wisely. Thank you for listening.